Coming up on Lawmakers, House Speaker Glenn Richardson introduces his cure for PeachCare woes. The Senate says no to a federally mandated real ID. And the governor's Hope Chest Amendment passes out of committee. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jesse Freeman. David Zelski is on assignment. Also on tonight's program, a Joint Health and Human Services Committee visits the Emory Winship Cancer Center.
And an exclusive interview with Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle. But first, our top story tonight. The House Speaker proposes legislation to close the funding deficit in the PeachCare insurance program. House Speaker Glenn Richardson has introduced a bill to change the income cap for PeachCare for kids from 2.3 times the poverty level to 2 times that amount. He says reducing the number of families in the program is a short-term fix for a $131 million funding shortfall.
If it took effect now, it'd be about 25 or 30,000 families would not qualify for PeachCare. But another way to look at that is if Congress doesn't do something, 278,000 won't qualify for PeachCare, and all of them are going to be sent letters telling them that the PeachCare is ending. So rather than look at who is not qualifying, I'm just going to say there's 250,000 people we're trying to cover.
That's not the choice. The choice is whether the state is going to take matters into its own hands and fund this now. The state has the money to do it, and we can do it with other available federal funds. This does not have to be done simply with state funds, and it can be done right now.
House Bill 340 is just the first step to stabilizing the PeachCare program, according to Richardson, but some child advocates say the program should not be modified.
I'm going to propose that we put in some co-pays in addition to premiums, and I'm going to propose that we put in a nurse call line as just one suggestion of a few things to make it more aligned with what employees have. And listen, we're going to have to change this program. We're going to have to rein it in a little bit, and we can choose to focus on those that go from having coverage to not, or we can choose to focus on those that wouldn't have coverage if we didn't have this program. I choose to focus on the 250,000 people that are the most needy to give this program to and to try to help out.
We're doing a good job with the program. There's no truth to any assertion that the state has overspent or done anything else wrong in this regard. Cutting back the program in any way or placing additional burdens on the families would be absolutely the wrong direction.
Speaker Richardson is the sole sponsor of House Bill 340. It has yet to be assigned to committee.
The Senate voted today to give the power to the governor to withhold biometric data of Georgia's citizens from the federal government. Senate Bill 5 is a reaction to a federal law that would require a federal real ID for plane travel and government services. Senator Mitch Seabaugh says he objects to the possible inclusion of data such as fingerprints or retinal scans.
The complete extent of the information that will be held on the card is still unspecified since the federal government has failed to issue rules and regulations. There is the potential that fingerprint and retina scans may also be required to be retained on that card. This ID card could result in the disclosure of a great deal of additional personal information that could be detrimental to our privacy. A national database would store all of this personal information. This database gives me great concern for the security of each Georgian's personal information.
Democratic Senator Steve Thompson took the well before the vote on SB 5 to accuse Republicans of hypocrisy on the ID issue. Republicans first voted for a state voter ID 2 years ago.
You folks scared the public into thinking that we had a gigantic problem out here. So you want them to have a state ID card. But now when the federal government wants to give them an ID card, you wonder where I was going. We're against it. We can't trust them. Where were the concerns about privacy of information with the voter ID card in that debate or in that bill that was presented?
We have been very concerned about private data on driver's licenses and been consistent about that, and tying it in a photo ID card for voting has nothing to do with it because it wouldn't have had Social Security numbers and fingerprints and retinal scans and whatever else that might have been on it.
Senate Bill 5 ultimately passed by a vote of 51-1. Senator Thompson voted for the bill. The Senate Higher Education Committee gives unanimous passage this afternoon to the governor's Hope Chest constitutional amendment. Lawmaker Sandra Parrish joins us with more. Sandra.
Jesse, no one on the committee today voted to oppose the measure, but that doesn't mean there wasn't opposition. 2 Democrats were delayed for the vote on Senate Resolution 125 due to another committee meeting away from the Capitol, and at least one tells me she would have voted against it.
Senate Resolution 125 was described by committee chair Senator Seth Harv as one of 2 non-controversial measures the committee would take up. It was explained by one of Governor Perdue's floor leaders, Senator Joseph Carter.
Simply put, Senate Resolution 125 allows Georgia voters the opportunity to affirm that Hope and pre-K should be the future, that those programs should be protected by restricting lottery expenditures to these programs only. Let me share a few statistics with you. From 1993 till 2003, $1.8 billion of lottery revenue was spent on projects other than Hope and pre-K. That was a point that was made a year ago when we brought this same legislation before your committee, Mr. Chairman, and when this legislation was presented on the floor of the Senate. It's a point that I make today only for history's sake. But I'll tell you that this legislation is not about the past. It's not about pointing a finger or about blaming others for the spending of lottery revenue. It's about the future, and it's about ensuring that lottery revenue is restricted to the future of these 2 programs.
There are things that need to be fixed about the way we're doing Hope scholarships. This language would threaten all those options, and we need the flexibility to be able to meet the dire needs of our education system, of our students, of our classrooms, and of our teacher training. We don't need to have our hands tied in that regard. That is why I would vote and would have voted, came here prepared to vote against the Hope Chest resolution.
Because the measure is a constitutional amendment, it requires 2/3 of the Senate and the House to approve it. Democrats were successful at blocking the measure last year, but have said they may not be able to do so again this year. Reporting from the Capitol, I'm Sandra Parrish for Lawmakers.
2 bills aimed at supporting school employees passed the Senate Education and Youth Committee earlier today. SB 72 by Senator Tommy Williams aims to lighten the load of school principals by authorizing the schools to hire administrative managers to take over the financial and business affairs of the school. Senator Williams elaborated on the importance of that bill.
Take the load of managing the day-to-day operations off of the principal and allow she or he to spend time helping teachers with instructional application.
Now, the bill was amended to require that the administrative managers have a minimum of a bachelor's degree. It received a unanimous do pass by substitute as amended. The second bill, SB 9, is sponsored by Senator Chip Rogers and is known as the Grade Integrity Act of 2007. That bill aims to protect teachers from pressures to change their students' grades. Jocelyn Whitfield of the Georgia Association of Educators explains the importance of that bill.
Some examples come from parents, come from the students themselves, if they need to make the grade for athletics, if they need to make the grade for the Hope Scholarship, if they need to make the grade so that they can get ungrounded. There's 1,000 different reasons, but the pressure comes to bear on the teachers, and it comes from administrators, it comes from parents, it comes from students, and it's unfortunate because the teachers should be allowed to grade the way that they know is right for the academic achievement of those students.
Senate Bill 9 was amended to make sure that schools are allowed to make their own grading policies and that a teacher may not violate the school's grading policy when issuing a grade to a student. It received a unanimous do pass by substitute as amended.
The Senate voted today to increase the penalties for absentee ballot voter fraud. Senate Bill 40 passed without dissenting votes. The bill is sponsored by Senator Cecil Staten, who took input from the Secretary of State's office.
In most cases, under the code as it stands, it is considered a misdemeanor. It is rarely prosecuted, though there is evidence of it, and the State Board of Elections, the Secretary of State's office, deal with this on a fairly regular basis. But this bill simply raises the seriousness of this type of voter fraud by making this a felony. A felony where upon conviction a sentence can be given of not less than 1 nor more than 10 years or to pay a fine not to exceed $100,000 or both. In dealing with the Secretary of State's office and others, we believe that it is an appropriate thing to do at this time to ratchet up the seriousness with which we take absentee voter fraud.
The Senate also voted unanimously to give optometrists limited prescription power for certain antibiotics and pain medicine. Senate Bill 17 is sponsored by Senator Seth Harp. Harp referenced the turf war between optometrists and ophthalmologists when he presented the bill to the Senate.
The education that optometrists have today is an outstanding process of education. The pharmaceutical studies that are made by the optometrist means that these young men and women that enter the profession have studied extensively and have knowledge, and this is a valuable part of treatment of people with eye diseases. Optometrist and ophthalmologist. Your ophthalmologist is an MD. The optometrist is a specialist in his own right, having completed 4 years of undergraduate school and 4 years of optometry school. The ophthalmologist is a specialist, I call him an eye surgeon. This is not intended to impinge upon ophthalmologists. It's intended to allow the broadening of the scope of practice for optometrists.
Also today, the Senate passed a bill that would make the crime of incest gender neutral. These three bills now head over to the House.
In the House today, there was agreement that Homeland Security requires some agricultural records to be kept secret. Representative Penny Houston explains House Bill 101.
For example, like floor plans to your poultry plants, a list of the assets that you would be willing to put in to protect your poultry in case we have an outbreak of disease.
House Bill 101 passed 143 to 12, and what began as a plan to raise the water level of Lake Lanier by 2 feet passed the House today as a recommendation to the Army Corps of Engineers to raise the levels of many Georgia reservoirs.
Not only is the capacity of Lake Lanier an issue in raising the volumes of the water there, but it's a matter of throughout the state of Georgia. Over on the east side of the state on Lake Hartwell, all the core lakes up and down the Savannah River. Over on the west side of the state, going down the Chattahoochee with West Point and the other lakes down through there, they're all issues that water quantity is a major issue, and by simply raising the levels of the pools, it takes care of a lot of our water quantity needs.
House Resolution 56 passed without opposition and moves to the Senate. Also today, Representative Tom Rice introduced changes to the divorce laws in the state. He explained that the bill resulted from testimony heard by the House Shared Parenting Study Committee.
Changes the best interest statute for the best interest of the child to make it a much more rigorous thing and much more directed thing in terms of what the judge has to consider as you go through that process. It also requires a shared parenting plan from anybody who is going to go through that type of process. And we think after 11, 12 hours of testimony and hearings that this represents the best thing we can do for those children who are involved in this very desperate situation of experiencing a conflicted divorce.
Representatives Ed Lindsay, Judy Manning, Earl Earhart, Mark Butler, and Tom Rice served on the House Shared Parenting Study Committee, which met last summer. Well, for those of you with access to the Internet, you can watch Lawmakers online. Visit our website at gpb.org for more information. Click on Watch Online, then follow the instructions for watching live or looking at past Lawmakers programs in our archives. That website address again is gpb.org. Just another way we keep you apprised of what's going on at the General Assembly.
Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle was sworn in as Georgia's first Republican lieutenant governor just over a month ago. Lawmakers David Zelski sat down with Lieutenant Governor Cagle Wednesday to discuss his first month in office. He began by asking him about the most surprising aspect of his new job.
We're excited about the tone that we've set within the Senate, and I think you've experienced a very bipartisan atmosphere there that's trying to focus on Georgia first and partisan politics last. And I think that that's been refreshing. As you know, we've passed 2 very important educational reform measures through the Senate that was done in a very bipartisan way, and we're excited about that. I think the tone is right, and we're moving Georgia forward in a positive way.
Those were 2 huge initiatives for you. Do you think it's going to have the same success now that it goes over to the House?
Well, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it will. We're working with the House leadership right now, along with the education chair there, and I'm confident that they're going to give it a very strong hearing. They participated in our press conference along the way, and if they have some adjustments, we'll work with them on that. But I'm confident that Georgia and the leadership in the House wants local control when it comes to education.
Been watching Mark Taylor the last 8 years preside over the Senate. You seem to be having a good time so far doing it. What are some of the things that you talked about bipartisan, but what are some of the key things that you really want to do different?
Well, I think the tone is important, certainly, but you have to respect each individual senator and allow them to have their voice heard, because they're elected by their constituency, and they need the opportunity to represent them. And so I don't want to really cut off debate, but I want to spell out early on kind of how the process needs to work and make your point, make it in a respectful way, and then go back to your seat and, you know, allow the process to work. And we've been able to do that, and it is an enjoyable process. We've not gotten into too many difficult circumstances quite yet, but it's still early in the session.
You talked about your charter school initiative and career academies. What are some of the other things on the list for 2007?
You know, education is really our top priority this session, and we did pass both initiatives, and we still have some work to do in the House. But moving forward, it's really also about jobs, and government doesn't create jobs, but what government does do is it creates the right circumstances and the right environment by which jobs can be created. And so we have an obligation to ensure that that pro-jobs culture within state government exists, that we're putting out the welcome mat for businesses to come to our state. And one of the key roles for the Lieutenant Governor is being a strong developer of economic development in our state. And we've been on many recruiting trips, visiting with companies, and we want to step that up. The other thing we want to do is offer a jobs advocate in the office of Lieutenant Governor that works with local communities and state agencies as a conduit to help them be prepared and ready when opportunities come to their community.
One thing that may scare people a little about coming to Atlanta is the traffic. What are some things to do with transportation while you serve as Lieutenant Governor?
Well, we had hoped that we would be able to really come with a very strong initiative relative to transportation. It doesn't appear that that's going to happen in lieu of all the other activities and issues that are before us, namely PeachCare. But I will tell you that transportation is an issue. Naturally, being from Gainesville and having to commute every day to Atlanta, I understand and experience congestion. In Metro Atlanta, we have the fourth worst congestion problem in the country, and that needs to be addressed. And I think you address that by really streamlining the process with the Department of Transportation. I don't believe that we're moving fast enough on programs, particularly as it relates to new roads. And so I'm going to have a very strong dialogue with the department in putting together a very strong plan in making sure that we meet those needs. I believe and am a strong proponent also of hot lanes as well as truck toll lanes and bringing in a market solution to help solve our issues. We can think outside the box. A lot of other states have changed their road systems to allow more traffic to flow in the busy times and converting lanes to one side, and we need to be very aggressive in looking at more ways to solve our congestion problems. Certainly down in the rural parts of our state, we need to ensure that we have roads for economic development, because those roads do mean that more people are going to have the opportunity to come there. And so it's about funding and prioritizing our funding and making sure that we're efficient and effective with the dollars in which we have.
The Gainesville area, poultry is such a big industry there. Poultry, along with a lot of things that are going on in Middle Georgia with forestry and farming. We talk about biofuel initiatives. What are some things out there and some goals you have for Georgia and ethanol and other biofuels? Clearly,
in Georgia, we can become less dependent on foreign oil. And the fact that we do have the biofuels that are coming to the market, ethanol provides a great opportunity for our state. Now, most of that naturally is market driven. But I believe that the state has a role to play in trying to help mature this market and bring really the ability of fuel to be accessible for consumers to have. And we can do that. We can do that through certain incentives for the new plants that are going to be opening up and trying to create incentives, sales tax exemptions for those construction of those projects, but also incentivizing gas stations in putting new pumps out and more tanks in the ground that are going to fuel that ethanol. And I believe that we can continue in that process. I'm working right now with Senator Tolleson on an initiative that would actually do that along the interstates and creating incentives for the marketplace to really produce and have a viable product for consumers to save money with.
What has it meant for Georgia having a Republican governor and Republican lieutenant governor?
Well, I think it certainly is a great partnership. I'm very proud of our governor. I think he does a wonderful job. He's a very sincere person and very genuine in his desire to move Georgia forward. And he and I don't always agree on everything, but I will tell you that we do both share the passion for Georgia. And it's been an honor to work with him. And it's a partnership that I think is going to be very unique for the state. He's given us a lot of responsibilities and a lot of opportunities that I'm very grateful for, and then of course through the legislative process I kind of wear two hats, one in the executive branch of government, being the #2 guy in state government, but also being the presiding officer of the state senate and the legislative side. So it's a partnership to work both sides, and we're excited about that.
Thanks for your time today. You're about a third of the way through this first session. Best of luck.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you.
When it comes to the fight against cancer, Emory officials say it's a battle they're determined to win. Today, House and Senate members of the Health and Human Services Committees toured the Emory Winship Cancer Institute to learn about its mission. Lawmakers Quandra Collins has that story.
Again, we have dedicated scientific facilities that support all of the missions in all those scientific areas.
Physicians at Emory Winship Cancer Institute say they're trying to help influence the legislature's decision on a measure that could exempt out-of-state hospital corporations from the state Certificate of Need laws. Legislators and Emory officials say these out-of-state hospital corporations, which specialize in cancer and care research, are no different than the Georgia hospitals that render the same service.
Many of the members of the House and Senate have flown out to see these hospitals, and so I thought it was very important that we have a balance and we see what our Georgia hospitals have to offer in cancer care. And I can tell you that certainly we have a lot to offer here in Georgia for cancer care. We are leading the nation in some of the things that, innovating things we do for cancer care.
I'm hoping legislators will think twice, that they'll recognize that a company which spends more in marketing than it spends in research, which spends more money in marketing to patients who can afford to travel for their care, who may be desperate for that care because they've been told by quality care providers that they've exhausted all the options, that they'll think twice about bringing that company into this community.
When it comes to Certificate of Need, legislators say they will carefully examine what needs to be done to make sure that Georgia hospitals and for-profit cancer facility treatments are on a level playing field. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Quandra Collins.
House Bills 210 and 263, both of which address the state Certificate of Need program, are currently in a special study committee.
Today was Georgia's first Epilepsy Awareness Day. Advocates gathered at the Capitol to bring attention to legislation to help those with epilepsy. Lawmakers Lanny Walker has more.
Approximately 125,000 people in Georgia are living with epilepsy. Some of them gathered at the Capitol this morning to help raise awareness about epilepsy and to support House Bill 127, which would prohibit pharmacists from substituting medication prescribed for the treatment of epilepsy. Sponsor of the bill, Representative Charlize Byrd, spoke on why she feels there is a need for such legislation.
I think this is important because epilepsy is a neurological disorder, and with any kind of variation of your medication, it causes you to have a seizure.
Dr. James Kiley of the Atlanta Epilepsy Foundation explained some of the dangers of substituting medication prescribed for epilepsy.
The concentration of the medicine in the blood may all change. When that happens, the person may get more drug than they're used to and have side effects, or they may get less drug than they need and have breakthrough seizures.
Also addressing the crowd was Diane Van Daren, an internationally known marathon runner who has epilepsy. She shared an experience she had when her epilepsy medication was substituted.
I was on seizure medications 15 years ago. I was given the wrong medication from a pharmacist. And my husband was out in the Catalina Islands sailing the ocean, and I was having multiple seizures, one after the other, there on the couch with my 3 small children.
House Bill 127 has passed out of the House Health and Human Services Committee and now moves to the Rules Committee for further review. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Lanny Walker.
The Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention, or GCAP, held its annual legislative dinner at the Georgia Freight Depot last night. GCAP members were joined by legislators and state officials to celebrate a 30% reduction in teen pregnancy over the past decade. Members of GCAP also launched their 15 by 15 statewide reduction initiative, which aims to reduce adolescent pregnancy another 15% by 2015. Lawmakers' Bridget Snapp has more.
Reaching young people early with the right messages and the right love and support and sustained, enduring relationships with people who really care is the key to all this.
The members of GCAP are dedicated to eliminating adolescent pregnancy in Georgia through community-based programs and advocacy work. Their many programs serve to educate both abstinent and sexually active teens, to assist pregnant teens, and to provide support and housing to teen mothers in second chance homes.
Several teens helped by GCAP were here to talk about their experiences, including Ashley York, an 18-year-old mother of a 2-year-old who found help when she enrolled in a Second Chance program.
I was addicted to meth and marijuana. I quit high school in the 9th grade. I didn't intend on going back because the way I saw it, I didn't need to. I was just like, I could do it. But I couldn't. I really needed to go back to high school. I needed help, real help, in order to be able to take care of my daughter.
Since living at the Second Chance home, Ashley has made honor roll at her high school, completed a drug rehab program, and will be traveling to Japan this summer as a student ambassador. In honor of her many achievements, the board of GCAP presented Ashley with a $2,500 check. Through its preventative work, GCAP estimates that it saved taxpayers $227 million in 2004 alone. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Bridget Snapp.
Coming up tomorrow, join us for a special live Lawmakers during Family Day 2007 at the state capitol. We'll be broadcasting from 10 a.m. until noon. That's a Lawmakers special, Family Day 2007, tomorrow morning at 10. If you have missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in Monday morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. Now stay tuned for Farmers Almanac TV. That program is coming up next here on GPB.
And that marks our broadcast for the 16th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Nwandi Lawson.
And I'm Jesse Freeman. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.